I really appreciate lots of people. It's always a bit of a risk. I think, well, is anyone going to come to one of my sessions? So thank you. I feel good. So my name is Scott Durow. I work for Microsoft. I'm a cloud developer advocate. Firstly, sorry, we do need to thank our amazing sponsors. Mark will kill me if I don't do this. So yes, really amazing sponsors. Thank you, everyone. And do make sure you go to the expo. So I work for Microsoft. I was a Microsoft MVP before I joined Microsoft. And my role is a cloud developer advocate. Your guess is as good as mine what that really means. But what I think it means, having been there for nearly a year, what I think that means is it means that I get afforded to be able to speak my mind to people like yourselves, rather than speaking the marketing perspective. Now, having said that, obviously I don't want to say anything that is off-brand, right? So, but nevertheless, I do want to make sure that everyone knows that I am talking from my opinions, okay, from the things I'm going to be telling you. But also, I do talk to marketing quite a lot, and they're obviously trying to sell the Power Platform because Microsoft is a business, right? Microsoft is trying to, make money for shareholders and things like that. So, let's not shy away from that. So there is a degree of selling there, but we'll come to that a little bit in a minute. But just so I can get to know you first, so hands up if you identify as a low-code maker in Power Platform. Oh, good. There's only 3 or 4 hands, which is really good. What about if you identify as code first? You kind of build stuff with C#, TypeScript, whatever. Okay, a few more. That's good, good. What about if you're all of those? Okay. So who didn't put their hand up? So, well, sorry, you gentleman in the front row here, what would you identify as then? Right, okay. Right, so that comes up to my next set of questioning. So hands up if you are mostly using Azure today. Right, okay, great, good. So that's the rest of you, the people who didn't put their hands up. What about if you're mostly using Power Platform? Okay, and then this is the, who's using Azure and Power Platform? Yeah, I see this is where we start to get into shaky ground. Because it's like, I almost feel like we now need to separate, like everyone get up, and everyone who said they identify as Azure, go onto this side of the room, and everyone who's identified as Power Platform, go onto this side of the room. Because it feels like that sometimes. It feels like we talk about this kind of like us and them, and then we can just throw stuff at each other over the room. And then Julian, sitting in the middle, will just sort of mediate and just, no. So this session is entitled, What Does It Mean to Be a Modern Software Developer? And a modern software developer is a term that I started using because it kind of skirts around, it avoids all of the difficult questions like low code and pro code and citizen developers and fusion development. All these things that have got, they kind of, they trigger me. I start twitching when people say things like that because what it's doing when we talk about those kind of things is it's labeling people into a specific pigeonhole. It's like, you only do citizen development, or you only do professional pro dev, or you only do infrastructure of code, or you only do Power Platform, you only do Azure. It's like, it's an only thing. Whereas actually, the world we're living in is we are building a new generation of apps having a completely different set of expectations from people. And yes, we're going to be talking about AI. Because yes, everything has to have a degree in AI. And so modern software development is about AI. It's about how do we make sure that our apps are accessible? How do we make sure that our apps work in collaborative environments? So like they work in teams. They can interop across with multiple different platforms. They work on our mobile devices as well as our laptops. So there are so many demands of the modern software developer. Now, and anyone here went to the Power Platform conference in Vegas? Right, yeah, a good number of you. But so those of you who didn't, this slide Charles Lamanna put up. And I don't think I've ever seen a slide put up at a big platform, a big premier conference like that by Charles or any of the sort of the senior leadership that has got these three things on the screen. And what we're seeing is a shift away from pigeonholing things into say, oh, this is low code, this is no code, because it's plus Copilot. Because what Copilot's done is it's suddenly leveled the playing field. It's like bringing everything together. Everyone's talking about AI, and so everyone wants a piece of AI. You know, your boss is saying, how do we get a bit of AI into this? It's AI enabled. And so by using Copilot, it changes the way that we build software. And so I think that is what modern software development is about. It's changing. It's not only transforming how you build, but also it's transforming what you build. And I think that is the key thing about modern software development. So thank you very much for coming, and I'll answer questions in the corridor. There's probably more too. So what I want to do is, the aim of this session is I want to show you all of the things that Power Platform can do that doesn't try and talk about specifically low code or pro code. Okay, it's like bringing everything together and just about we are building software. And so normally at this point I would tell a story, some kind of low code story about the fact that, you know, we started off using low code and then we were disillusioned and because it didn't do what we wanted it to do, and then someone came along and showed us Copilot and it enabled us to do it, and it was really, really easy. If I ever say something is really, really easy, please come and slap me, or just, you know, because modern software development nothing is easy about building software. It's just, it is a fallacy to think. So if anyone says, hey, we need Power Platform in our organization so that it's going to be so easy. We need to make, somebody needs to change a form. Anyone can come in and change a form. They can just drag and drop it and it's done. Come and tell them to speak to me about that, because it is not, there is always a challenge. And I think that there is a certain degree of like a stress that if someone says something is easy, it creates a stressful environment. So, but what I do want to say is about a pro code story. So firstly, has anyone seen the film Inside Out? The cartoon? Yeah, and this is Inside Out 2. Just love those films, and Riley is the teenager in Inside Out 2. And the idea is that there is loads of these kind of emotions, these characters in her head kind of controlling with a control panel. So I like to think of like if Riley was a software developer. That's what I've tried to think about. And so these are all the originals. So you got anger, worry, joy, disgust. So I asked Copilot, what if each of these emotions was a software programming language, which would they be? So it said that anger was C++. Yeah. I think that's something to do with like memory allocation, and you just get, you know, I did ask it again and it came up with anxiety as well. So there's like a, you know, two things. JavaScript, worry. I worry about JavaScript because if I see someone writing JavaScript in Notepad++, it's going to end in tears. It really is. So yes, I mean, and not just because the colors match. I mean, that's just a happy coincidence. But yes, the joy. Python is a joyful language. Love teaching kids to teach in Python. It's a great thing. Discuss white space. Really great. Has anyone used white space as a programming language? So the idea is that all of the keywords is a non-printable character. Unicode character. So if you look at a white space program, it's completely blank. There is no characters. And the only way of doing it is by looking at the hexadecimal to find out exactly what characters. So if you want to go there. So sadness, XSLT, I feel so sad about XSLT. I loved XSLT. It's XML transfer, and no one uses it anymore. So yeah, that's one. But then there's a new set of people came in with Inside Out 2. Hey, look, you see the little animation there? That was really good. So, so we've got JSON, right? Where it was like, it's just there all the time. It's like, you in the corner, there is always JSON. Just everywhere you look, you're going to find, and it's just, yeah, it's just there. It's just part of the wallpaper. YAML, if you think Python's bad with indentation, YAML stresses me out. It's like, how many spaces do you need? Is it 4 spaces? Is it 2 spaces? I'm not sure. Embarrassment, VB. No one's, if I say, hey, hands up if you've ever programmed any VBA. No, I've never done any VBA. No. And then Ruby is everyone loves, I wish I was a Ruby developer. It's these special, amazing people. But then there was this other one, this deep, dark secret. And that's definitely assembly language. Anyone programming in assembly language? Yeah. A long time ago. Is anyone still programming assembly language? That's the deep, dark secret. It's just like little snippets in your code just snuck in there. So I got this simple set of JSON files. That's somebody I was having a conversation with who might have done the keynote today. And they've got the simple set of JSON files. And they needed to make some simple changes to those JSON files. And so, yeah, it's fairly easy with Pro Code. You're going to manipulate your JSON files and make some changes. But then they wanted to use Power Platform. And then it went downhill from then. So Power Platform just doesn't really work very well with JSON. And then, I want to create a GPT on top of 350 gigabytes of PDFs. Surely we can do that in Power Platform, sure. No, we can't. So these stories keep on cropping up where pro devs come to me and say, well, I tried to use Power Platform. I tried to, and then they told me it couldn't be done, so I don't want anything to do with it anymore. And it saddens me. It really does. So I was trying to work out why. Why is it that I keep on getting these people coming to me saying, I tried to use Power Platform and I couldn't. And I'm having conversations with marketing at the moment. They're doing surveys. And maybe some people here might have been contacted by marketing, and they're doing surveys, they're asking pro devs, they're doing a pro dev survey, like asking them why they're not using Power Platform. And you're going to get so many different, all those things, like, I've got 350 gigabytes of PDFs, or I've got JSON. But fundamentally, you've got all this amazing stuff with Azure. And Power Platform is kind of like Azure in a box, right? It's built on Azure, and it automates Azure. So you create a Power Platform environment. It's behind the scenes spinning up Cosmos DB and SQL, Azure SQL and Azure Functions. And you create a Copilot Studio agent, and it's spinning up an Azure Open AI instance, and you're deploying all these models for you. It's doing all this stuff automatically for you. But fundamentally, I think the problem is that when we think about software development from a professional development perspective, from a code, from C#, Python, whatever it is, .NET, we're starting from the inside out. We're doing this. We're going, okay, now I've built all this stuff. Now, can I build Power Platform on top of that? Well, no, because if you start from the inside out, you're always going to come up against the problem where the Power Platform doesn't really do what you want it to do in that particular way. So I think if we're going to use Power Platform as in a modern software development way, I think we have to start from the outside in. You see that there was a tenuous link to the film. Yeah? And you see, I do think about these things. So if we start from the outside, what we're doing is we're starting off building things using Power Platform's ways, and then if we do get to a point where actually we want to take it to that next step, then we can start to use all this other stuff internally within Azure and build custom functionality. And so we can get so much further, so much quicker using Power Platform, starting from the outside in, and then filling those gaps if we need to. Now, this, I'm just going to show you, I'm going to scrub through a demo that Brian Cunningham did at PPCC in Vegas. And so I'm going to start from about 4 minutes in. And so what he did is he demoed something called Plan Designer. Now, Plan Designer is a fantastic example of starting from the outside in. Okay, so what he did is he said, right, he typed in this prompt at the top here. Let's help a US insurance company manage trainings for their network of reps across jurisdiction insurance categories, and I'm attaching some screenshots of what we do. Pretty amazing, right? So this is using GPT-4 Omni, so it can actually not only look at our prompt and understand what we're asking, but it's also going to look at screenshots of business processes and Excel spreadsheets and things like that. And from that, it's then going to create a plan. So it starts off and it identifies the user roles. And it's identified the business problem, and then it's identified that there's a user role of insurance representative and training manager and compliance officer, and just describes what those roles are. It gives you all the different things here. It's creating user stories for us. Look, as a training manager, I need to create and schedule training sessions so that the representatives can enroll in them. And as it keeps doing that, once it's done that, then it goes on to the next stage, and it starts to define all the tables that we need and the relationships between those, and also the apps that we need to build and the orchestrations that we need to build, and all of these things. And you can see there's the example of the relationship. And not only has it created the relationships, it's also created some sample data for us. Let's go to the sample data. There's some sample data. It's just added in some sample training sessions. So it's kind of starting us, getting us a long way along the process. And so you can then drill down into any of these areas. You can see here, it's saying here, it's an employee training app, which is going to be a Canvas app. And so then I can drill into that, and then I can open up each of these items here, and then, yeah, here's the app that it's actually built on top of that. All from that simple prompt that I gave it. So it's starting from the outside in. So if we think back to what that original statement that Charles said, Copilot is transforming not just how you build, but what you build. Because the actual apps that you're building there are very, very likely to be way ahead of what you would have tried to build if you had started from scratch. Now, who's used Copilot? GitHub Copilot. Yeah, so a few of you, right? So let's ask GitHub Copilot to do the same thing and see what it comes up with, because this is a worthy comparison. I think if I was a pro coder and I was going to do the same thing, I was going to have to build an app, I might use GitHub Copilot. And look what it's doing. It's already given me code. It's given me loads and loads of stuff. It's like I'm going to have to create some React stuff going on here and routing, and it's got an API. And oh look, sorry, the response match is public code. It's blocked. Please rephrase your. So that didn't happen when I tested it. Never ever demonstrate AI unless you're Scott Hanselman. But what it was doing is giving me loads and loads. It's the inside out, right? So what Plan Designer is doing is it's starting from the business requirements and then identifying all the different apps. And then once I've identified all the apps and all the roles and all the tables, then I can start to build out those and enhance those as I go. Here, goodness only knows how I'm going to do that. I don't even know where am I going to deploy that? Am I going to deploy it to Azure? I'm going to deploy it to some custom hosted website? So I have created a gross simplification of the cost of code. So this is like, I'm so sorry. I mean, it really is, it's so simple, but it is not, it's more complicated than this. But just bear with me, okay? So business value divided by lines of code equals total cost of ownership. So the more business value you have and the more lines of code is going to give you your total cost of ownership. And so every single time you add in lines of code, you are going to have a much, much bigger cost of ownership to deal with. But how far can we get with Power Platform? Okay, because normally with full stack development, if I'm going to do everything with pro code, I can get up and running very quickly. I can use something like npm to start a website locally on my machine. I can maybe create some pipelines. But very, very quickly, I'm going to get to the point where it's saying, I don't want to have to think about how I deploy it. That's somebody else's problem. That's typically what happens. It's like, I've got it working, I've got the code working, I've checked it into source code. It's now somebody else's problem to make sure that that is deployed, make sure it's the security, it's optimized, the database is optimized, we need a database administrator to do it. So what we're constantly doing when we're starting from the inside out is we're creating technical debt. We're saying it's somebody else's problem. Whereas with Power Platform, we start from the outside in. Actually, what we're doing is we're saying that all of those things have already been thought out for us. So we're starting from a position that there is already somebody's done all that hard work about deciding on how you need to optimize your database, how it's going to be deployed. So those of you that haven't done any work with Power Platform, when you deploy something with Power Platform, you create a solution. And so you put all your elements into that solution, you put your tables into that solution, you put your apps into that solution. And when you want to deploy it, you simply import that solution into the target environment. Now that app could already exist in that environment with the existing tables, the previous version. And what Power Platform does is it automatically works out the differences between the current version that's there and the new version you're importing it. So has anyone done this with SQL Server or PostgreSQL or anything like that? Has anyone done this like database scripts where you've got to go and work out the deltas, and if you're adding a column, you've got to add a column, or maybe drop another column, or create a temporary copy of that table, and then migrate the data across and all? Has anyone done that stuff? Yeah, not for long stuff. But is it easy? No, it's not easy. It's very, very. But typically, when we're starting development, we don't want to think about that. It's a hidden cost. It's going to hit you down the line. Whereas Power Platform automatically does all of that stuff. So I put in a slide for Power Pages for Ulrika, who's Power Pages through and through. Power Pages is a great example of that, because it's like it's already decided on all the best practices of how you host a website. And it gives you a checklist of all the things that you should do. So it's basically giving you, it's a set of opinions that you already are inheriting from somebody else that's made all the best practices decisions. But nevertheless, although I've been talking about the fact that Power Platform automatically does this for you, automatically does that for you, it's fantastic, it's easy, slap myself. It's not, no, there's going to be times when you will need to go and build some functionality that is not natively part of Power Platform. Again, it's that outside in. I do everything as much as I can in that outer layer, and then, okay, someone comes along to me and said, I need to add a piece of functionality where I want to have a image slider or some kind of image manipulation or something like that. There's no way you're going to do that in Power Apps itself. Well, what Power Platform does is it gives us an opportunity to extend using all of the tools that you'd be using, like C# and TypeScript. So we don't have to choose one or the other. We don't have to say it's Power Platform. We don't have to be on both sides of the room chucking stuff at each other. It's about saying, as long as we think as a modern software developer, how far can we get with these tools that have already got these opinions built in? And then, only then, we say, okay, there's a little extra piece of functionality here that we need to extend. We can then extend and augment using traditional software development. So what it actually means is it's what Microsoft talk about as a composable technology architecture. So at the bottom here, there is these things that just mostly is never going to change in your organization. You've got if you've got an ERP system. Anyone got SAP in their organizations deployed? Yeah. Is that ever going to are you ever going to get rid of SAP? No. You can just imagine someone walking into a meeting and say, right, okay, what we need to do is replace SAP We're going to write our own custom version of it and get rid of it. We don't want to pay all these license fees. No one ever is ever going to say that. So that you've always got this core bottom layer here, which is literally not going to change. I think Ryan Cunningham says that we'll basically be living on Mars before you've replaced SAP. And then we've got these 2 layers on top of it. So we've got the stuff that's unique to your organization, where you can build that out in Azure. There's all those things that actually is very unique. It's things that you may be doing, you're selling services, you've got software as a service or something like that. But then on top of that, you've got your innovation layer. And this is where you can rapidly build applications. And so this composable technology architecture, you can pretty much map any solution that you build into these 3 layers of the stuff that you've got high friction to change at the bottom, and then at the top you've got low friction, the stuff that actually you can really change very, very quickly. And with Copilot, because we've got AI on the end, because you have to have AI in every single diagram, AI, and with things like plan designers, that's what gives you that agility. That's what gives you that really very speedy things to change. So there is an application that the Azure team built called Composable Real Estate. And it uses a full stack Azure deployment. It's got Azure static websites, it's got Azure OpenAI, it's got Azure API, APIM, it's got Azure Functions, it's got Cosmos DB, it's got and then it's got Redis cache and everything in there, Azure Front Door. And so what I thought it would be a great idea to do is to say, well, what is the opportunities in here to augment this, to use Power Platform? So what in this diagram is the bottom layer, that SAP layer, and what is the top layer, and the stuff that we can change really quickly, and then what is that middle layer? And so what I did was, see that little animation there? I said, well, actually, let's take the portal. And so what Composable Real Estate is they are a fictitious company, obviously, that they allow people to go onto their website and reserve real estate listings. So you can go and look for a house to rent for a certain number of days, months, weeks. And so previously, the whole portal was built using Azure Static Websites, and it had like a headless CMS, and there was thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code there. But those lines of code weren't really providing any value, really, because you could replace it with Power Pages and do it in next to no lines of code. But what at the bottom here we do have is we have the finance system, and we have a Stripe integration with that finance system. That's the stuff that's hard to change, because that finance system is being used by lots of different parts of the organization. And Stripe may be using different parts of the organization. And so there's this database that handles all these payments, and there's an Azure function that handles all these payments. And so that's middle layer. That's the stuff that is unique to our organization, because we built this set of logic. And so we can see this composable architecture. And then we've also got Power Apps, which then handles the administration of listings, allowing us to go and create the listings, change the fees, monitor all the reservations, all of these kind of things. But then also we can actually go and say, right, well, actually, what opportunities are there to add more to this that we just wouldn't have been able to do? And for me, this is where modern software engineering really comes into its own, where you can then actually experiment at very, very low cost. Because once you've got an architecture like this and you've already started to use Power Apps and Power Pages, it becomes very low cost to then create more and more apps. In fact, over time, the cost of building apps kind of goes down and down and down. I don't think there's any kind of platform that has that same notion. Most platforms is like the cost of building apps kind of is the same across the board. And so we could build a booking management app, which is like mobile. We could just try it out. We could just experiment and maybe deploy it to just a small number of people and see if that works. And if it works, then great, we'll add more. We could integrate with Teams to say, well, actually, it sends out reminders to different parts of the organization, and by pinging them in Teams. We can create like a co-pilot for our workers to allow them to educate them on, answer questions on real estate regulations. So, and once we've built these, then we can just develop them and add to them at a very, very, very quickly. And that's what gives us that business agility. So how can we extend Power Platform? So we've got the ability to extend Power Platform the front end using TypeScript for client-side logic. And we can extend the back end, the server-side logic, using C#. We can create custom connectors, which a custom connector is effectively a open API definition that allows us to integrate with Azure services within an organization or external services, anything that is accessible over HTTP. We can also use something called virtual tables. Now, a lot of people say, I don't want to use Power Platform because I don't want to put all my data inside Power Platform. And it's actually, it's like, you know, probably one of the biggest barriers to people not wanting to. It's like, well, we use our own database. We use Azure SQL. We use Cosmos DB. Well, actually, what you can do in Power Platform is use something called virtual tables, which allows you to bring in data from other data sources and sit that alongside your data that is sitting natively inside Power Platform. And then, of course, you can then extend using Azure for any other demanding workloads. So what I thought I'd do is show you a few things of what this actually looks like. So the first thing I wanted to show is this isn't Plan Designer, but this is kind of like the precursor. Plan Designer is in private preview at the moment, so you have to sign up if you want to get involved. But I could put in a prompt here to say, create an app to manage real estate listings with tables for listings, listing fees, and listing reservations. So this is effectively the same thing. This is starting from the outside, working in. And it's going to do me the same thing. It's not going to do quite as fancy as a Plan Designer, but what it is going to do is it's going to go and use Copilot to understand my prompt and work out what tables and what the app should look like for that. So what's special about this is it doesn't only just create one table, it's going to create multiple tables and relationships between them. And actually, I use this to build out this Composable real estate application. 5 minutes, thank you. So I actually use this, so 10 minutes. 10 minutes, or just give me a high five. So I actually use this to very, very quickly build out that Composable real estate, replacing the Azure thousands and thousands of lines of code. So you can see here it's created me my listing reservations so I can view the data. So it's created me some samples. So if I look at the listings, it will have these are these properties. And I can actually have a conversation with this as well. So I can just say, well, actually, I want to be able to collect additional information. So I can say I add a column to the listings table to collect number of bedrooms, for example. I'm not going to do that now, but and what this ends up with is then creates me an app, which is, if I run this, you can see here, this is I've just added a little bit of branding up here, but this is the structure of the app that it creates. So it creates like a gallery along here, and I can go and edit this data. But then what I wanted to do is I wanted to actually have the ability to have like a slider. So you can see here, and this is a touch screen as well. I can drag and I can swipe this across here and be able to have like the full screen mode here to look at the images. And that's not possible inside natively. Copilot's not going to get you anywhere to do that. There's no way of achieving that using Power Apps. But so what I did is I built this using TypeScript. This is a TypeScript PCF component. And once you've done that, once you've deployed it, it then appears inside our app design here as a component alongside all the other components. And actually, it's basically using exactly the same technique. PCF is how Microsoft build components for Power Apps. So you're using effectively the same technique to extend Power Apps as Microsoft do. So it's a very level playing field. So that's the administration app. But then what about the actual portal? So I use Power Pages, and I put in the same thing, a Copilot. I said, I want to build a portal for reserving listings. And it kind of creates some, something that's gives you a starting point, right? And because it's in Power Pages, you can come in here and you can start to customize it. You can add I'm not even going to attempt to start going. Ulrika will talk about that, about how you can change your fonts and style it and all these kind of things. But the point is it gets you a long way to start with. And then you can then go and customize it. But what I wanted to do also is I wanted to have a little bit more sophisticated user interface, because I can use it uses something called Liquid Template, which is from Shopify, which is just a templating engine for HTML. And so you can get quite a long way. You can create like cards, and I can view the listings here and do searching. But I wanted to create something a little bit more sophisticated. So in the same way as I added that slider component in to Power Apps, I can do the same thing. I can create extensions in TypeScript and then put it into my portal here. And so you can see I can filter by the price or the different features. But the great thing is if I go over to the page that is on, what that means is that I've still got all of the best parts of Power Pages, all the configurability, the ability to do content management around it. And I've just slotted this component in. So I'm not, as soon as I go into TypeScript, it doesn't mean I have to do everything in TypeScript. I can still get all the benefits. So again, it's that outside-in story again. And so if we go back into our portal, what I've also got down here is I've got a bot, an agent. And so I can ask it something like, who are Contoso Real Estate? So by default, when you first deploy this into, well, there we go, great, sorry. You can bring that feedback back to the team. So, what it does by default is it will actually use the copy on the website to be able to answer. It's just like an LLM using generative AI on top of all of the data in my website. But what I can also do is I've extended that because I said, okay, well, I actually want to allow people to search for real estate listings by using natural language. So by default, it created this bot for me automatically. And by default, it gave me the ability to search the content. But then I've gone in and extended it to allow me to look. So I can say I'm looking for a house by the beach with a pool. And what this does is I then will actually go and call a custom connector inside my Copilot here. And then it uses the generative AI to then give me information that comes back from that custom connector. And so, again, it's like you get to a point where, okay, we've got 80% of the way there. Now we need to add that extra piece of functionality. And as long as we start from the outside in, we're already playing by Power Platform's rules. So it's going to make it you're not actually going to start to thrash. And you're not going to get to that same place where it says, well, I've got these JSON files. Why can't I just use Power Platform to edit those JSON files? Well, it's because you started from the development perspective. You started from the pro dev. So if we were to talk to marketing today, they might come to you and say, well, why aren't you using Power Platform? So I would like to know, thanks, 5 minutes, not just the high five as well. I would like to know why. So this is my question to you. Can anyone share, those of you using Azure, based on what I've shown you today, why would you not use Power Platform? Is anyone going to be brave enough? Really? Sorry? Pricing. I was waiting for the licensing thing to come up. Thank you, Guido. Yeah, I didn't plant you there. Yeah. So exactly. This is the problem. And this is what when I talk to marketing about, is that actually, if you go to today and you say, right, I want to use Power Platform, then quite often what you'll hear is you'll say, well, I don't want to have to go and pay for it. I don't want to have to go and get some Power Platform licenses. Well, the good news is that you can play with Power Platform today for free. So you can get all of the things that I've just shown you today. You don't have to pay anything to work in a developer environment. It's only you need to pay for it when you actually want to start to develop it, to deploy it, and actually your end users using it. So today, you could go off and you can create a developer environment inside Power Platform and start to play with all those features. And then from that, then you'll start to see the value. And then when you see the value, then that will then be translatable into the actual cost of the licenses that you'll be paying. Because nothing is free today. Even if you're using free software, open source software, that's not free. You still have to pay for the people to maintain that. You have to pay for where you're going to host it and deploy it. Nothing is for free. It's always about a value proposition, right? So I'm going to put my my contact details up here. And if anything I've said to you today, you think, that's a load of nonsense, please email me and let me know why. Or if I said something today and you said, well, actually, no, that resonates with me, and I think I might want to start using Power Platform in a way which you're not using it today. If you need help, please email me, and I will hook you up with the right people. But thank you ever so much for coming today, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your conference, and please do fill out the survey and let my boss know how great this was.